Let me start from the very beginning of this teaser, because the way it opens is already enough to make your chest feel tight. There's no music at first, there is no grand cinematic moment, there is just silence. And in that silence, you hear breathing. Heavy, exhausted, broken breathing. And before you even see a single face, before you even see a single frame of what is coming, that sound alone is enough to tell you exactly where this season is going to take us. And then, slowly, the image begins to form. And what we see is not what any of us were expecting to see first. We do not see a crowd, we do not see a trial, we do not see guards or soldiers or the streets of Jerusalem. What we see first is Jonathan Roumie as Jesus, and the look on his face in this teaser is something that I genuinely do not have the right words to describe to you. Because in all the seasons that have come before this one, we have seen Jonathan portray Jesus with joy, with fire, with compassion, with authority, and with love that feels so real it almost reaches through the screen and grabs you. But in this teaser, what we see on his face is something different, something that goes beyond all of that. It is a kind of deep, settled, unshakable peace that sits right next to the most profound sorrow you have ever seen a human being carry. And the combination of those two things together on one person's face is almost impossible to look at directly, because you know what that face means. You know what is coming. You know what he knows. And that knowledge makes every single second of this teaser feel like a countdown. Now, let me tell you about the details in this teaser that most people are going to miss if they are not paying close attention, because Dallas Jenkins has never been someone who puts things in a trailer just to fill space. Every single frame, every single image, every single sound in this teaser is intentional. And one of the first things I noticed, right after that opening shot of Jonathan, is the way the lighting is used throughout this entire teaser. In the earlier seasons of The Chosen, the scenes with Jesus were almost always lit with warmth, golden tones, soft light, the feeling of something radiant and alive surrounding him wherever he went. And that was not an accident. That was a visual language that the show was using to tell us something about who he is. But in this teaser, that warmth is gone. The colors are darker, the shadows are heavier, the light feels like it is being pressed down by something enormous and invisible. And that shift in the visual tone of the show is one of the most powerful storytelling choices I have seen in recent memory, because it does not just tell you that something has changed, it makes you feel it in your body before your mind even has the chance to process it. And then we begin to see the other characters, and this is where the teaser truly starts to build that unbearable tension that I know every single one of you is going to feel the moment you watch it. We see the disciples, and I want you to understand that the way they are shown in this teaser is heartbreaking in a way that is very specific and very deliberate. These are not the disciples we have watched grow and stumble and laugh and argue and believe over 5 seasons of television. Or rather, they are those people, but something has happened to them. Something has cracked. You can see it in the way they are standing. You can see it in the way their eyes are moving. There is a kind of desperate, helpless energy around them in every frame they appear in during this teaser. And it communicates something that words in a script could never fully capture. It communicates the feeling of watching someone you love more than your own life walk towards something terrible and being completely powerless to stop it. And that feeling, that specific and awful feeling, is going to sit in your chest for the entire length of season 6. I am already sure of it. But the moment in this teaser that stopped me completely, the moment that made me pause and sit very still for a long time afterward, was the brief shot of Jonathan carrying the cross. It lasts only a few seconds. It is not dramatized or made into something cinematic and grand. It is simply shown. And that simplicity is what makes it so devastating. Because we have heard about this moment for 6 seasons. We have known it was coming. We have told ourselves that we were going to be ready for it. And then you see it for even 3 seconds in a teaser, and you realize that no amount of preparation could have ever been enough. Jonathan Roumie does not look like an actor in this shot. He looks like a man who has fully given himself over to the weight of something sacred and unbearable, and we all know the enormous amount of physical and emotional preparation he went through for this season. We saw the weight loss. We heard him speak in interviews about what this process did to him spiritually and emotionally, and every single one of those things becomes visible in these few seconds of footage. This is not performance. This is something else entirely, and season 6 is going to prove that to every single person who watches it. Now, let us talk about something that the teaser shows us, which I think is going to become one of the most discussed and debated moments among the chosen community the moment season 6 drops, and that is the trial scenes. Because this teaser gives us glimpses, just glimpses, of what those courtroom moments are going to look like, and even in those brief flashes of footage, you can already feel the injustice radiating off the screen like heat. You can already feel your blood beginning to rise, because there is something uniquely and specifically painful about watching a person who is completely innocent being dragged before people who have already decided what they are going to do and being forced to stand there and answer questions that were never asked in good faith. And that is exactly what this teaser is showing us is coming. And the way it is shown, the framing, the expressions on the faces of the people sitting in judgment, the stillness of Jesus in the middle of all of that noise and hostility, it is all already communicating something that is going to hit this audience with enormous force when they sit down to watch the full season. Let me be specific about what I mean, because I think it is important to walk through this carefully. In the glimpses of the trial that this teaser gives us, one of the things that immediately stands out is the energy of the people surrounding Jesus during these moments. The guards, the members of the Sanhedrin, the officials, the people who are supposed to be the most learned and the most spiritually serious people in that entire world. And what you see on their faces is not righteousness. It is not even anger in any honest sense. What you see is something much smaller and much uglier than that. It is the specific energy of people who feel threatened, people who have made a decision based on fear and self-protection and are now working backwards to justify it. And the show has always been extraordinarily good at portraying the full humanity of its characters, including its villains. But in this teaser, that skill is on display in a way that is genuinely uncomfortable to sit with, because these are not monsters, they are people. And that is almost harder to watch than if they were monsters, because if they were monsters, you could distance yourself from them. But when they look like ordinary people making terrible decisions out of fear and pride, something inside you recognizes that, and that recognition is deeply unsettling. And then there is Caiaphas, and I have to say that from what this teaser is showing us, the portrayal of Caiaphas in season 6 is going to be something that people talk about for a long time, because the actor is doing something incredibly nuanced in the brief moments we see him in this teaser. He is not playing Caiaphas as a simple villain who wants Jesus dead because he is evil. He is playing him as a man who is completely convinced that what he is doing is necessary, a man who has told himself a story about why this has to happen and has believed that story so completely that he cannot see anything outside of it anymore. And when Jesus stands before him and answers his question with those words, when he says, "You have said so," and speaks about the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, you can see in the teaser the precise moment that Caiaphas makes his final decision. And it is not a moment of triumph. It is not a moment of obvious villainy. It is a moment that looks almost like relief, like a man who has been looking for a reason and has finally found one. And that specific and disturbing detail is going to make the trial scenes in season 6 some of the most layered and emotionally complex television that this show has ever produced. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about Judas, because the teaser gives us a look at him as well, and what we see is already completely gutting. Because by this point in the story, the betrayal has already happened, the 30 pieces of silver have already been handed over, Jesus has already been arrested, and what this teaser shows us of Judas is a man who is standing in the rubble of a decision he cannot take back, surrounded by consequences he never actually believed would arrive. And the thing that makes it so painful to watch is that you can see in his face that he genuinely did not think it would go this far. Whatever he told himself about why he did what he did, whatever justification he had built in his own mind, it has completely collapsed. And now he is left standing with the full weight of what he has done and absolutely nowhere to put it. The scene where Judas throws back the 30 pieces of silver is one that every person who knows this story has always known was coming, but seeing it played out by this cast, with this level of emotional honesty, in this visual language that The Chosen has built over 6 seasons, is going to be something entirely different from simply knowing the story. It is going to feel like watching it happen for the first time. And the teaser is already giving us enough of a glimpse of that scene to know that it is going to be one of the most devastating moments of the entire season. And speaking of devastating moments, I cannot move forward without talking about what the teaser shows us of Pontius Pilate, because Pilate is one of the most fascinating and complicated figures in this entire story, and The Chosen has always understood that. From the very beginning, the show has portrayed Pilate not as a cartoon villain, but as a man who is trapped between his own better instincts and the political realities of his position, trapped between what he can see clearly and what he is too afraid to act on. And in the teaser for Season 6, that internal conflict is written all over him in every. Now, I want to talk about something that I think deserves its own dedicated conversation, because it is something that the teaser communicates not through dialogue, not through plot, not through any specific scene or moment, but through something much harder to define and much more powerful than any of those things. And that is atmosphere. Because if there is one thing that this teaser accomplishes above everything else, it is that it creates an atmosphere so thick and so heavy and so specific that you can almost feel it physically pressing down on you as you watch. And I think that is one of the most important things to understand about what Dallas Jenkins and his team are building with Season 6, because it tells you something very significant about the artistic intention behind this entire season. They are not just trying to tell you what happened. They are not just trying to recreate the events of the Crucifixion in a historically accurate and visually impressive way. They are trying to make you feel what it felt like to be there. And the teaser is already succeeding at that in a way that is genuinely remarkable, because every single element of it, the sound design, the color palette, the pacing, the way it moves between moments of terrible stillness and sudden overwhelming noise, all of it is working together to create something that feels less like a television trailer and more like a lived experience. And that is an extraordinary thing to be able to say about a piece of promotional material that is only a few minutes long. Let me talk specifically about the sound design in this teaser, because I think it is one of the most underappreciated aspects of what makes it so effective. From that very first moment of heavy breathing in the silence, the sound in this teaser is doing an enormous amount of emotional work. And one of the things that the sound design is doing that I find particularly brilliant is the way it handles the crowd noise. Because in certain moments of the teaser, you can hear the crowd in the background, not clearly, not as individual voices, but as this low, surging collective sound that rises and falls like something alive. And the effect of that sound, that shapeless roaring of a crowd that has become something less than a collection of individual human beings and more like a single force with a single ugly intention, is deeply unsettling in a way that goes beyond anything a visual image alone could create. Because sound reaches a part of your brain that vision does not always access. Sound can create a physical response. Sound can make your body react before your mind has had the chance to catch up. And the sound of that crowd in the background of this teaser is already doing exactly that. It is already making your body understand something that your mind does not yet want to accept. And when you are sitting in front of your screen watching Season 6 and that crowd sound fills your speakers at full volume, I genuinely do not know how any of us is going to hold it together. And then I want to talk about the music, because the score in this teaser is doing something very specific and very intentional that I think a lot of people are going to feel without necessarily being able to articulate what they are feeling. The Chosen has always had an extraordinary musical identity. The music in this show has always known exactly when to swell and when to pull back, exactly when to give you emotional permission to feel something, and exactly when to withhold that permission and make you sit in the discomfort of a moment without any musical cushioning to soften the blow. And in this teaser, the music is operating in that second mode almost entirely. It is not giving you the big emotional swell. It is not handing you a cinematic release valve. Instead, it is doing something much more sophisticated and much more demanding of its audience. It is holding the tension. It is sitting in the discomfort alongside you without resolving it. And the result of that choice is that by the time you reach the end of the teaser, you have been holding your breath for so long without realizing it that when it finally ends, the first thing you do is exhale. And that exhale carries a weight that is very hard to put into words, because it is the exhale of someone who has been shown something true and beautiful and terrible all at once. And that is exactly the emotional territory that Season 6 of The Chosen is going to live in for its entire runtime. Now, let me turn to something that I think is going to be one of the most talked about elements of Season 6 among people who have been following this show closely from the very beginning. And that is the question of how the show is going to handle the physical suffering of Jesus during the crucifixion. Because this is something that Dallas Jenkins has spoken about in interviews, and it is something that the cast has spoken about as well. And it is something that I think every fan of this show has quietly been wondering about for a long time. Because The Chosen has always walked a very careful and very thoughtful line between portraying the full humanity of Jesus and maintaining the reverence and spiritual weight that this story demands. And when it comes to the crucifixion, that balance becomes more difficult and more important than it has ever been at any point in the series. Because this is a story that requires honesty. It requires the audience to truly understand and truly feel the physical reality of what happened. But it also requires something beyond raw depiction. It requires meaning. It requires the suffering to be shown not just as suffering, but as something chosen, something accepted, something that carries within it a love so enormous that the only way to express it was through this. And from what this teaser is already showing us, Season 6 has found that balance. It has found the way to show us the reality without losing the meaning. And that is perhaps the single most difficult creative challenge that anyone making a film or television series about the life of Jesus has ever faced. And based on this teaser, I believe with my whole heart that this team has risen to meet it. Because look at what the teaser is already communicating about how Jonathan Roumie is approaching these scenes. Look at the way he carries himself in every frame. And I want to be very deliberate about this, because I think it is the most important performance detail in the entire teaser. Even in the moments of greatest physical difficulty, even in the frames where you can see the exhaustion and the pain and the weight of everything pressing down on him, there is never a moment where Jesus looks like a victim. There is never a moment where the suffering erases the intention behind it. And that is an incredibly difficult thing to achieve as a performer, because the natural instinct when portraying physical suffering is to let the suffering become the whole story. But Jonathan is doing something far more complex than that. He is holding the suffering and the choice to endure it simultaneously in every single moment. And the result is something that is almost impossible to look away from. Because you are not just watching a man in pain, you are watching a man who has decided that the pain is worth it, who has decided that you are worth it. And that decision, visible in every line of his face and every movement of his body throughout this teaser, is what is going to make the crucifixion sequence in Season 6 not just emotionally devastating, but genuinely spiritually transformative for everyone who watches it. And I want to take a moment here to acknowledge something that I think is very easy to overlook when we are caught up in the excitement of a new season announcement and a new teaser and all the details of what is coming. And that is the sheer cost of what this cast and crew have given to bring this season to life. Because it was not just Jonathan who gave everything to this season. Every single person involved in the production of Season 6 of The Chosen has spoken about how different this experience was from anything they had done before, how heavy it was, how it followed them home at the end of every single shooting day, how it changed them in ways they are still processing. And when you watch this teaser knowing all of that, when you understand that every frame you are looking at represents not just incredible technical filmmaking, but genuine human sacrifice from people who care about this story with everything they have, it adds a layer to the viewing experience that is very difficult to describe, but very impossible to ignore. Because this is not just a television show, it never has been, and Season 6 is going to prove that more definitively than any season that has come before it.